some of the newer science around AFA microalgae, Aphanizamenon flos aqua. A question I often hear, if AFA is so great for us, why don't more people know about it? And it's because of the complexity and cost of doing large-scale efficacy testing of any kind of natural whole foods. A study of the benefits found through eating whole foods or whole food-based supplements is rarely undertaken. It's extremely expensive. But there are several studies that have been done in vivo and in vitro on AFA extracts and whole cell AFA. So this is the extract of the Aphanizamenon flos aqua, and then the whole cell algae that has simply been dried at very low temperatures. The first thing we're looking at is a placebo-controlled study which provides solid evidence that AFA has a radioprotective effect against damage caused by accumulated doses of radiation exposure. AFA reduced cellular injuries in the cerebral cortex cells after repeated radiation exposure. So this would mimic what we might, for example, experience if we did radiation treatments for a cancer. And if you see my cursor up in the upper left-hand side, this is the control cell. And these are normal, healthy cerebral cells. There's a few small, darker ones. This is their normal look. The upper right-hand corner are healthy cells that have just been given AFA algae with no damaging radiation. And you'll notice that the cells, again, they look very healthy. And there's very little difference between these two. If you go to the bottom left, this is the cerebral cortex cells that have been exposed to repeated doses of radiation. And these big dark spots you see are highly damaged cerebral cortex cells. The lower right-hand corner is the same amount of radiation exposure, but adding AFA algae. And you'll notice that the cells in this sample are nearly exact to the cells in a normal, healthy brain. Meaning that AFA algae had the capacity to protect these cells to the point where the visible damage that would occur normally isn't really even present. That is unbelievably powerful as far as helping us understand the kind of benefits we can get as a neuroprotective agent from our AFA algae. This study is a controlled study again that provides solid evidence that AFA extract has protective effects against reactive oxygen species damage to neural cells. So again, this is about brain nerve health. Reactive oxygen species, or ROS, are a very, very damaging type of free radical that human beings get all the time. And many things can cause ROS to happen. Radiation, other types of toxin, and just frankly, exhaustion, too much oxygen use, not enough oxygen getting to the brain in time to neutralize the damage. So what you have here on the upper left is a control. So this is what a normal, healthy control would look like, and you see nothing. Because if you take a look at the ROS damaged cells, the green represent highly damaged or dead cells. So this green color only shows up in damaged cells. Now, if you take a look at the same damaging event, but algae has been given, there is some damage compared to a control, but considerably less than if there had been no introduction of the free radical damage at all. And what's fascinating is that if you take a look at just AFA and the control, again, you see zero damage. So this just tells us that AFA by itself would cause no damage, but indeed would prevent damage from the factors that would cause free radical damage to occur in these cells. This is another type of illustration from the same study. It showed that this AFA extract also reduced or prevented cellular damage due to mitochondria after oxidative exposure. So now we're not just looking at the cell itself, we're looking at the mitochondria within the cell. And the mitochondria is the energy factory in the cell. the energy factory in the cell tends to be incredibly sensitive and vulnerable to free radical damage because the process of creating energy in the mitochondria actually leads to its own free radical production. So being able to protect the mitochondria from free radical damage is something that is important on a daily level, even if you have not been extra exposed to free radical damage. So the far left here is the control cells, and the red are healthy cells. The green are damaged cells. So in the control cells, you see there's quite a bit of healthy cells, and very, very minor, almost ghost damage occurring. You add in the TBH, which is the damaging oxidative factor, and the healthy cells are way less, but the damaged cells are everywhere. When you look at the toxin that introduced free radical damage, adding algae in, again, now you see actually way more healthy cells and no free radical damage in the mitochondria. And then AFA alone, again, you see actually more healthy cells and zero free radical damage. So it's not only protecting the cell nucleus, it's protecting the cell mitochondria, AFA algae, from damage after free radical exposure. Phycoerythrocyanin is a pigment that's unique in AFA. It has a powerful effect on what are called MAO-B enzymes. MAO-A is an enzyme that's essential to healthy neurotransmitter function. The MAO-B enzyme does not appear to be biologically necessary and in fact has many negative effects. It creates free radicals, it breaks down dopamine and PEA, which can damage your neurotransmitters. Inhibiting its production prolongs the action of dopamine in the brain, which is proven to help brain function and mood. High MAO-B levels are present in Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and severe depression. They are implicated in CFS and other neurological disorders and diseases. So we are talking about an enzyme that's associated with severe brain diseases, and a pigment in AFA, as a matter of fact, is shown to be the most powerful MAO-B inhibitor of all known substances to date. AFA's unique light pigment complex is effective at a dose of only a few nanomolars. A nanomolar is how concentrated it is. So a few nanomolars is very, very, very low concentration. So you don't have to take a lot of AFA to get this very powerful protective benefit for brain chemistry. And this is actually just an illustration of how MAO-B works in Parkinson's. Parkinson's disease results in a loss of dopamine-producing neurons, which leads to neuron death, and that again produces less dopamine, and it's a cycle downward. But MAO-B inhibitors that prevent the RS formation also prevent the degradation of dopamine, which results in less symptoms of Parkinson's. And so this actually was an illustration for a drug whose benefits were far, far less than the benefits observed from AFA algae. AFA directly affects epigenetic pathways. Epigenetics is the process by which your environment affects your genes. It refers to external modifications to DNA that turns your genes on and off. These modifications don't change DNA, but they affect how the cells are reading genes. Your messenger RNA carries this information from the DNA in your nucleus to the protein-making factories in your cells, or the ribosomes. Research has found that epigenetic marks decorate mRNA like Christmas lights on a fence. Epigenetics tell the messengers from your DNA what to do. I love that, because what it means is that here's your DNA. These are the places where what you eat affects your DNA. It affects your histone modifications, which is actually the DNA itself. It affects DNA methylation. DNA methylation tells your DNA what to silence, what disease to silence. Histones can turn things on and off. Then there's transcription, but non-coding microRNAs, this is where the AFA algae is having a direct effect in translating the information from your DNA to the proteins your cells are creating. MicroRNA, it regulates the messenger RNA by silencing or translating that genetic information. It affects all cellular functions such as development, differentiation, growth, and metabolism. Disruption of microRNA is implicated in traumatic brain injury, MS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and ALS, among other things. Scientists report that protective levels of AFA algae are correlated with increase and high levels of the antioxidant miRNA 14GA. In other words, AFA algae causes your microRNA to produce its own antioxidant to protect the messages coming from your DNA to the messenger to create the different proteins in your cells. This is cutting-edge information. Function of microRNAs is something that's really only been studied for just a few years as we're beginning to understand its effect on our health. And this is just an illustration. I'm not going to go through it, but I wanted you to see how incredibly complex this process is. And our algae has the ability to keep this process functioning correctly. It's a miracle to me. So that is our presentation. And I am going to go ahead and get out of my screen share. I'm going to